Hello, and welcome to South Asia Diary with me, Mariam Wardak. Our cover story tonight is from Bangladesh. Last week, the country was jolted by a horrible ferry accident. At last count, 68 people had died. Survivors say the boat was overcrowded and there was no safety regulations. In fact, this has been a reoccurring problem in Bangladesh. The country's massive river systems offer a great mode of transport. However, the logistics do not match up. Most of the boats take on too many passengers and run into trouble. Tonight, we bring you a special report on Bangladesh's floating nightmares. Also on the show,
meet India's female air warriors deployed at forward bases near the border with China. Sri Lanka's tea pickers face generational poverty as the once lucrative industry collapses. Nepal's cricket captain accused of raping a minor. Police seek Interpol's help to arrest the cricketer. A deadly suicide attack claims dozens of lives in Kabul's Shia-dominated district.
every year, Bangladesh is rocked by multiple ferry accidents. Dozens of people end up losing their lives due to negligence. Last week was another example. A ferry accident in northern Bangladesh claimed the lives of 68 people. What led to this horrible tragedy? Why does Bangladesh report so many ferry accidents?
Another day, another ferry accident in Bangladesh. This time in the northern town of Boda. Around 90 people were on board this ferry. Most of them were heading to a Hindu temple in the vicinity. Midway through the journey, the boat flipped. Onlookers panicked and screamed from the shore.
I was at the riverbank and saw a loaded boat capsize. We rushed to the spot on a boat. We rescued the bodies of 4 babies and 2 women. We also rescued some others alive.
At last count, 68 people had died. Among them, 22 were children, including some as young as 4 years old. Rescue divers and volunteers were pulling out bodies even 3 days later. But some of the survivors are in hospital. They wish they could do it all again. Before starting the journey, the boatman had warned that the ferry was too heavy, but no one bothered.
When
the boat was in the middle of the river, the current was very strong and the boat sank. And somehow I swam and reached the bank.
Officials are blaming overcrowding. The ferry was carrying 3 times its capacity. Disasters like these occur frequently in Bangladesh. This is a country that is crisscrossed by rivers, almost 130 of them to be precise. So naturally, they are important for transportation. Ferries carry tens of thousands of people every day. Most of them are overcrowded and unsafe. There are no life jackets on board, no officials to keep the capacity under check. It's all about getting from point A to point B, come what may. This attitude has proven disastrous for Bangladesh. Since 1994, there have been 250 ferry incidents. Put together, they have claimed more than 2,000 lives. These are some of the biggest ones. December 2021, a packed 3-story ferry caught fire in southern Bangladesh. 40 people were killed. June 2020, a ferry sank in Dhaka after colliding with another vessel. 32 people were killed. And finally, February 2015, an overcrowding ferry crashed into a cargo vessel, killing 78. Every time the government's reaction has been the same: announce compensation and move on. This time in Boda, it's no different.
We are currently giving 20,000 taka to each family for a funeral. We are also paying for the medical expenses for the injured.
These rivers certainly have the potential to be a key transport lifeline. They carry around 14% of all passengers here. That's around 87 million people annually. The government is hoping to expand it even further, but the accident rate is too high. Without proper regulations in place, these ferries are a floating disaster. South Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
India and China share one of the most treacherous frontiers in the world. It is long, rugged, and guarded by the Himalayas. Forward bases along this frontier are important for both sides. At one such Indian base, female officers are taking on important roles. They are flying rescue helicopters and operating weapons on fighter jets. It is a historic deployment for a country that lags behind on gender parity in the armed forces. Let's meet these trailblazing pilots.
This is Tezpur Air Station in India. Just 170 kilometers away is the border with China. If fighting breaks out, this is the first line of defense. Today, the air station is carrying out mock operations. Let's meet the two pilots. Flight Lieutenants Ani Awasti and A. Nain. Both of them are busy with the final checks. This is what they will be flying today. The ALH Mark III helicopter. After securing the required clearance from air traffic control, they are off. Indian Defence Forces began recruiting women to non-medical positions in 1992. But even today, the ratio is skewed. Only 2.5% of the 1 million personnel are women. Most of them are administrators, medics, and intelligence officers. Here in Tezpur, these women are hoping to change that. Not only are they deployed on forward bases, they are prepared to be first responders. Back on the ground, let's meet another trailblazer. Flight Lieutenant Tejaswi Rangal Rao. She is a weapon system operator at the air station.
Being part of any actual operation is what every fighter pilot in the Indian Air Force trains for, because that's where we can show our original mettle. Our pilots from various bases in the eastern sector are ready to respond in any case of any eventuality. We are always ready for any kind of tasks and challenges that may come upon us.
Flight Lieutenant Rao is aware of the significance of her posting. She is the first female weapons operator in the Indian Air Force.
There have been brilliant women before this who have broken the glass ceiling and paved the way for us to achieve our dreams and to help us achieve our goals and serve our nation. The training in the Indian Air Force is always is at par, and be it woman or man who's taking part in this, they are treated on equal footing, and we go through the same stringent methods and preparation.
In recent years, India has pushed to expand the role of women in defence. Courts have been on the forefront of this movement. Until recently, women were limited to 5-year terms in the defence forces. Now they are eligible for permanent commissions. Despite these efforts, progress is slow. The Indian Air Force has just over 1,300 women in its ranks. They work on both air and ground duties. With the government's help, the numbers will keep rising. South Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
Sri Lankan tea is famous all over the world. It was one of the biggest exports, earning the country $1.3 billion. However, these recent economic crisis has ravaged the country. Tea pickers are struggling to make ends meet. While inflation is almost at 93%, their salary remains unchanged. Many of the workers on tea estates fear their families will be trapped in a cycle of hardships. What led to this generational poverty? Let's find out.
The cold air nips at her fingers as Amasi Geeta gets to work. She's one of the 100-odd tea pickers in Norwood. It is a sleepy hill nestled away in Sri Lanka's central province. Like on all days, Geeta is laser-focused. She must pick enough leaves to secure her daily wage and support her family.
My husband is dead, and in the 4 years since he died, I've been managing things. I only have work here. I don't have work anywhere else outside because I have a small child. I can't travel anywhere for work because I want to look after her. My only income is my salary here, and then now I don't even get that.
Workers like Geeta never leave the estate. They live and die here. Tiny gravestones will eventually mark their final resting place. Pay was always meager at tea estates. But at least it was enough to make ends meet. Not the case anymore. Sri Lanka's economic crisis has upended the tea pickers' lives. Inflation has soared to 93.7%. However, the basic pay at Norwood is still the same. $2.8 for 18 kilograms of tea leaves.
I wonder what on earth am I going to do? Whenever I start thinking that I'm unable to feed my children, they will come and ask me for an egg. Or some anchovies. And I feel really sad. That's how we are living right now.
Geeta is a Sri Lankan Tamil. Her ancestors were shipped from India as indentured labourers. Her mother too was a tea picker. Geeta fears the same fate now awaits her daughter.
My children's education has been disrupted and badly affected because of the economic crisis. Other than that, we're also really struggling to eat and buy household goods. For all sorts of reasons, we also don't get steady work here. I'm finding it extremely difficult to provide education for my children.
Most children here tell the same story. Meet Kanagaraj Pavitran. His mother works in the Norwood estate. The current crisis has forced him to drop out of school.
I do want to go to school, but our house is small. We did build another one, but that gets soaked. Because of that, I've stopped going to school. My mum wasn't well, so our income is lower. My mum doesn't always get a salary, and my dad sometimes sends money, but other times he doesn't.
Trouble started around 2021. Former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa embarked on a disastrous agricultural campaign. Overnight, he banned chemical fertilizers. The once lucrative tea industry also collapsed. All over the island, output fell drastically, by almost 25% between July 2021 and 2022. Workers like Geeta were the worst affected. At this rate, these workers face generational poverty. The current generation struggles with low pay. The next generation struggles with no education. It is an evil design to protect the cycle of poverty, to keep the Lankan Tamils poor.
So you see, Where the marriage certificate says race, it says Indian. Because of this, if we have a child, they will also be labelled as Indian. It's as if we are not Sri Lankans, but Indians. That's why we are already scared that our children might not be able to get jobs in the future.
Tea was once the crowning glory of Sri Lanka's economy. Around 95% of the domestic output was exported. Total value, almost $1.3 billion. During those glory days, these estate workers never got their due. Now in crisis, they are now being pushed to the front. South Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
Cricket is almost like a religion in South Asia, which means players are often treated like gods. While real gods are perhaps infallible, cricketers are not. Nepalese fans are learning this the hard way. Their cricket captain has been charged with sexually assaulting a minor. His name is Sandeep Lamichhane. Nepalese authorities are asking Interpol to help arrest him. How has Lamichhane reacted to these charges? What does it say about the cricket culture in South Asia?
Nepal was never a powerhouse in the world of cricket. But Sandeep Lamichhane was the exception. The 22-year-old leg spinner travelled the world playing cricket. He's played the Indian Premier League, the Big Bash, and also the Pakistan Super League. But skill isn't a substitute for character. 2 weeks back, Nepalese officials issued an arrest warrant for Lamichhane. His crime? Sexually assaulting a minor girl in Kathmandu. Lamichhane is playing the Caribbean Premier League at the moment. Initially, he said he would return and fight the allegations legally. Lamichhane has penned a note on Facebook. All these things affected me mentally on one hand, and on the other hand I had to go through illness, and due to mental stress and ill health, I kept myself in isolation. My health is gradually improving, and I'm planning to return to Nepal as soon as possible to defend against the false complaint against me. Nepal's cricket board has already suspended Lamichhane. He's been stripped of his captaincy. The charges against him were levelled by a 17-year-old fan. She used to interact with Lamichhane on social media. One day, he lured the fan to a hotel room in Kathmandu and sexually assaulted her. This version has been confirmed by the police officers in Kathmandu. They're asking Interpol to help arrest Lamichhane. This isn't the first time a cricketer in South Asia has been mired in assault cases. Bangladeshi pacer Rubel Hossain was accused of raping an actress in 2015. Sri Lankan opener Dhanushka Gunathilaka was accused of raping his friend in his hotel room in 2018. All these incidents reveal a cultural problem linked to cricketers. Very often they are worshipped as gods in this part of the world. Lamichhane was no different. He's the second fastest to 50 one-day wickets, also third fastest to 50 T20 international wickets. Sort of like the lone star in Nepal's disappointing cricketing scene. If the charges are proven, Nepal could make an example of Sandeep Lamichhane. A warning that cricketers are not above the law. South Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
Afghanistan's capital has been attacked again. This time, a suicidal bomber targeted a school in Kabul's Shia neighborhood. Dozens have been killed and injured. The attack has exposed the security shortcomings in Afghanistan. The Taliban's conquest was supposed to end the streak of violence. Instead, it has led to a turf war between the new regime and other terror groups. Our next report decodes the surging threats in Afghanistan.
Taliban fighters stand guard at this school in Kabul. They are too late. Just minutes back, a suicide bomber attacked this institution. More than 100 people are dead or injured. Now, All that remains are concrete debris, shattered windows and blasted roofs.
We were in the midst of the exam and suddenly an explosion occurred. The blast happened between where the girls were seated. The girls were sitting at the first row and we the boys were sitting behind them. When I got out of the class, I injured myself with a barbed wire.
I was busy doing my exam and suddenly I heard the sound of gunfire. I left the classroom but our teacher told us to wait there. Then suddenly a terrible sound rang out, so I jumped over a wall.
This is the Dashti Barshi neighborhood of Kabul. It is populated mostly by Shia Muslims, especially the persecuted Hazara community. And today, these children had gathered at this building for a test. By some accounts, 300 of them. About 1 hour into the test, the explosion went off.
I was sitting inside my booth when the blast happened. When I heard the sound of the explosion, I saw so many pieces of flesh in the air. People were panicking so much, some were injured and some were crying. I went to help them. I helped to carry some dead bodies.
No group has claimed responsibility for the attack. But in the past, the Islamic State has carried out similar operations. They have targeted the Hazara community consistently. The attack also reveals intelligence failure on the part of the Taliban. 300 students had gathered in a Shia-dominated neighborhood. The question is, why wasn't there tighter security at the school? How did the planners skip below the radar?
Neither the police officials nor the intelligence officials were aware of any activity going on or a big exam happening in the center. So the officials from the center were very reckless.
They're now blaming the school officials instead. The fact is that Taliban have failed to end the cycle of violence. Their conquest in 2021 was supposed to break the endless attacks and reprisals. Instead, it has kicked off a turf war. The Taliban on one side, terror groups like the Islamic State on the other. South Asia Bureau, WION World is One.
That's all we have for you on this episode of South Asia Diary. We'll be back next week with a brand new lineup of stories. Until then, stay safe. I am Mariam Wardak and you are watching WION World is One.